Okay, welcome everybody. Today is May 12th. In China, today is the National Disaster Relief Day. Let me screen. Yep. In 2008, there was a earthquake at approximately 2 p.m. 2:28 in Sichuan, China, and this is a magnitude 8 earthquake with a depth of about 19 kilometers. It erupted about 240 kilometers with the surface displacement of several meters. It was felt even by nearby countries. And a lot of people died. Come back here. Okay, the over 69,000 people lost their lives, including 68 in Sichuan province itself. So it's quite a disaster. And then, of course, the financial loss is estimated at about 1 trillion rand, or 146 billion US dollars over 3 years. So as part of that, China did a very large stimulus package, as well as started to think how can the country itself get prepared for earthquakes or natural disasters. So let me show you some of the photos of the event first. This is the town. You can see a lot of buildings has already collapsed. Another view, the whole building is inclined like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And another view. So a lot of people actually is buried under these rubbles. Here you can see some of the people lying there, and they are still digging through the rubbles and trying to find bodies. The rescue people has come in now. The two red dogs are the rescue people. Another view of all this. Yeah, another view. This is near the river. You can see a lot of buildings just becomes a pile of rubbish. So they created a memorial of this one, so that showed the time when the accident occurred on 2008 May 12th, and therefore May 12th is now selected as the National Disaster Relief Day. It issued its first white paper about 1 year later to actually as a memory to the disaster in 2008 May. So what we are looking at today will be mainly some of its content of the white paper. The paper itself is not too long, but it contains a lot of material. It composed of 6 chapters, and it used to mark the anniversary of the devastating, they call it Wanzhou earthquake. So let's look at the disasters in China. Except volcano, China has every kind of the natural disasters: meteorological, earthquake, geological, marine, biological, forest, or grassland fires, everything except volcanic activity. China doesn't suffer from volcanic activity, but all the others natural disasters happen in China as well as in other parts of the world.
So it would be very similar to Australia.
Yep.
That list.
Yep. Almost the same, isn't it? Except earthquake. Maybe we are a little bit better in earthquake than China. China really have a lot of earthquakes. Australia is a large tectonic plate, so our earthquake is not huge. But again, because we are surrounded by earth, by water, we might have what's that called? The tsunami. Tsunami, yeah. Because of earthquake nearby. But we ourselves will not have a lot of earthquakes. New Zealand do have a lot of earthquakes.
Yes. I was in Christchurch just a couple of months after their major disaster. So, yeah.
Yeah, last time when I was in Indonesia, it also have quite a bit of earthquake happening. Anyway, about 70% of Chinese cities and about 50% of population are located in vulnerable areas. So quite 70% of cities, well, you can understand that cities usually is along the coast. If it's along the coast, it will subject to all the monsoons, cyclones, etc., the weather disasters. Again, the Australian plates and the Euro-Asia plates, I'm talking about the tectonic plates, collided, and our Australian plate is moving underneath the Asian plates, and all the material from the ocean floor is scraped up to form the Himalaya. And some of the plates is now underneath China. Therefore, in the western part of China, we have the plateaus because the Australian tectonic plate is underneath it. Technically, in India, is not part of Asia because it is formed by the scraps from the sea floors of our Australian plate. So India is more Australian than Asian, if you look at that way. But anyway, because the plate are still moving together at about 2 centimeters per year, so there is a lot of movement. And when the movement suddenly jerk, so it will have an earthquake. So earthquake in China is very common. So you have earthquake, it has meteorological problems, geological problem, marine problems, etc. And then 2/3 of China are threatened by floods. Again, that's because of Yellow River. We know that Yellow River bring down a lot of silts. And with a lot of silts, that means the riverbed get raised up, and then once the water is too much, then it will overflow. And over the thousands of years, Chinese has been building higher and higher river banks. So now the Yellow riverbed is actually higher than the farmland nearby. And therefore, if the Yellow River's banks broke, the water all flow out of the Yellow River. But when the water subside, the water will not be able to flow back to Yellow River because the Yellow River bank is actually higher than the farmland. And so flooding is a major issue in China as well. Another thing is, of course, the tropical cyclones, the weather patterns in east and southern coasts. And some of the inland areas also suffer from it. Now, sometimes China has floods, but other times it has droughts. The reason is that as the moist air from Indian Ocean blow towards the land, towards India. Then the air will rise to overcome the Himalayas. Because the air rises, it cools, and therefore its moistures get condensed. So on the southern side of Himalaya, that's India, will get a lot of rain. On the northern side of Himalaya, or the eastern side of Himalaya, which is China, will be very, very dry. And therefore, unless the moisture comes from the North Pole, otherwise China will not get a lot of moisture. And therefore, drought is also a big issue in China as well. So you can see there are quite a bit of geologically, because its position, because of everything, China is not a very good position. So destructive earthquake with a magnitude of 5 or more strike the countries almost all the time. Another thing is because of the continental plate of Australia is underneath China, so about 69% of China's total land area is mountainous as well as is being plateaus, and that means there will be frequent landslides, mud rock flow, or cliff collapse, and so forth. So China has a lot of natural disasters, and of course, in addition to that, we will have the biological disasters as well. But interestingly, when I look through this white paper, it talks about biological disasters, but there's no particular action towards biological problems. Given that the last pandemic China experienced is 2009, we have a pandemic, the swine flu. And before that, 2003, we have the SARS. China is a major epicenter of SARS. But this white paper is 2009. So I don't understand why the biological or pandemic disaster is not in the plan of this white paper. But anyway, we'll get to that a bit later on. The other thing is, of course, the frequency. China has all kind of problems on almost on a weekly, if not daily basis. So every now and then there will be a case here and there will be a case there. Of course, some are bigger, some are smaller, but all these disasters is ongoing. Earthquake, fire, flooding, droughts, so on and so on. And
but what you say about the ongoing disasters, do you think that's part of the reason why China didn't report COVID-19 earlier than it did?
well, if we return to COVID-19, now we have to understand the Chinese official, now the local doctors might have detected it, but if they didn't report, then the Chinese government will not know. Okay, so the earliest reports that we know of about COVID-19 by the Chinese government is December 24th or 25th, 2019. And then the investigation is sent immediately. And by December 31st, China notified the World Health Organization that there's a influenza, a lung influenza happening in China. And WHO activated a special response team on 1st of January 2020. So in terms of response, now How long after they recognized that? Then it took China about 10 days on January the 10th or 11th to have the sequence of the virus produced and published. Once you have the sequence, then you can start to develop tests to test for that virus. So the test is available approximately on 20th of January, around that time. Then with the test available, you can now look at all the cases, how many cases actually test positive, and then you can trace back all the old cases, trace back some of the deaths. Now remember, COVID-19 is very similar to an influenza illness. Its symptom is coughing and is not a lot of running nose, but coughing is one of the main, a little bit fever. So a lot of the cases might have, a lot of the influenza cases might actually be COVID-19, but nobody detected. Nobody knows. It just, again, November, December, January are peak seasons for influenza-like illness in the northern hemisphere. So among all these influenza-like illness, how many are actually COVID-19? Nobody knows. But when a family of three saw a doctor in Wuhan, the doctor immediately realized it is unlikely that a family of three will have influenza at the same time. They might have influenza straggling off, and therefore she noticed that and then reported to her hospital. The hospital in that afternoon sent the signal to Wuhan's CDC, Center for Disease Control, and then the disease control in that afternoon at around 5 p.m. collected sample of the patients and then sent it to Beijing for identification, and therefore it took them about a day to get the result back. So it is about December the 28th, something, or 29th, something like that.
In other words, as with so many other things, when it comes to the timing, you don't listen to Trump.
Yep, don't listen to him. He is making up things all the time.
Of course, yes.
Okay, we will talk about that in the third term. I will have a. I don't know whether third term is actually a good time. I really like the pandemic to be almost finished before we talk about that. I don't want to put salt on people's wound. So I want to get it over and then have a better understanding before we go back to. But anyway, I just give you a little bit of what I understand at the moment. But anyway, coming back to here, huge losses, and every year in between 1990 to 2008, within that 19 years, every year natural disasters affected about 300 million people. So there's a lot of people. It's 15 times more than the population of Australia. We have about 20 million people. But natural disasters affected 300 million in China every year, on average. So China need to do something about it. So they started thinking of a comprehensive disasters reduction. Now, disasters, some disasters you can reduce, some you can't. So if you can't, then you try to build up better relief. But you can reduce it, better reduce it. So I think that is one of the key function of a responsible government. The government should allow us to live on our on the in the country with safety, at least safety involved, obviously, no man-made disasters. What I refer to man-made disasters is like crime in the neighborhood. Crime is always a disaster, but that is man-made because it's done by humans. So we should try to reduce that one. Another type of disasters is war between countries. It's always a disaster for a country to go into war, especially if the war is happening on your on the land where you live. So again, government should be responsible to reduce all this. And again, there's other disasters which can be reduced. So that's what China is talking about: comprehensive reduction. Now, China's run this 5-year plan every 5 years. So basically, they put forward a plan, and then the government execute the plan put down in the last 5 years. So in the 5 years, then you will execute the last 5-year plan while planning for the next 5 years. So this is how the Chinese government works. So in the 11th 5-year plan, which is 2006 to 2010, so when the white paper are coming out at 2009, it is near the end of the 11th 5-year plan, and is also near the end of the planning for the 12th 5-year plan. So in the 11th 5-year plan, is already put down that you will build a relatively complete working system and operational mechanism regarding disasters reduction. Now, we will talk about all this in more details, but these are what are a plan is a very broad statement. And to greatly enhance the capabilities related to disaster monitoring, early warning, prevention, preparation, emergency handling, disaster relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So if a disaster happened, we want to know it as early as possible. We want to be able to send in help as early as possible. For example, in an earthquake, we have a 72 hours of golden time to dig the people out. If we can't do it within 72 hours, then the people buried under the rubbles probably will die. So the faster you can react to a disaster, the better you can save people's life. And because of doing that, that means you got to be prepared. You cannot say, oh, there's a disaster, and think about what you want to do. You better have a plan, and then when a disaster happens, you put the plan into action. And then obviously you want to raise public awareness about the disaster reduction and get everybody involved, and get the emergency rescue skills up so that the people know what they are doing and they can do it, perform it in a professional way, and to significantly reduce human casualties and direct economic losses caused by natural disasters. So what are the objectives? To strengthen the ability in management. So that means you build up a database. You can't manage something you don't know. So first thing is you build up a database about natural disasters, and then draw up national diagrams of the situations. Where are the key areas? What are the higher risk? How many people die in this and that? And then we do a summary. Of course, we don't want a person to die, but sometimes disaster do happens. When that happens, then you will be able to know how large is the impact. How big is the impact? By knowing the impact, you will see, okay, these are the problems, we should put more resources into it. So collecting the data, and then collecting the statistics, and then provide mechanism to let every people know. So mechanism for prompt news releases. The worst thing in a disaster situation is when rumors travel faster than the disaster itself. Rumors sometimes actually travel much faster, and that is also may create secondary damages. So we don't want to do that. So in order to avoid that, news agency becomes very important. You have to let the news know what is happening and what people should do, and then ask the people to follow good advice. And then mechanism to check on the damage, and then enable information exchange, consultation, announcement, and so forth. Because in the case of a disaster, we can understand there will be a lot of people working together to try to do rescue. Some may come with heavy earth-moving equipments. Other may be coming with surveillance information, satellite information, all kinds of people. And these people or medical people, have nurses, and so forth. You need to be able to coordinate. So that is about the management. You have to strengthen this ability. Another is monitoring and early warning, and possibly forecasting. For meteorological disasters, like we know there's a large cyclone or monsoon or whatever is coming, then we can warn the population, hey, you better put on some safety boards on your windows because winds are going to be very large. Or for example, a very hot weather is coming, and then for us, you will say, oh, no fire, no liquid fire in the public. You cannot light a fire because the weather is too dry and too hot. Something like that. So you need to be able to monitor the situation, provide early warnings, and then forecasting possible coming. So in order to do that, remote sensing satellites. So they are going to launch a lot of satellites into the sky, watching over the land, and promotes comprehensive utilization and integrated development of monitoring and early warning infrastructures. And then a mechanism to issue disaster risk warning, how dangerous it is. Now at the moment, because in the case of earthquake, the wave moves on Earth at the speed of sound. So when there's an earthquake happening in one place, then the earthquake's impact will be propagated to the neighborhood at the speed of sound. If we can have a detection system near there, the detection system will be able to detect it and then send it out at the speed of light. So one is speed of sound, one is speed of light. The speed of light is much faster than speed of sound, and therefore you will be able to provide early warnings to people nearby. So in case, for example, we have a magnitude 8 earthquake, we know that for a earthquake like that, its impact zone, for example, might be, say, 1,000 kilometers. We know that its impact zone is about 1,000 kilometers. And we know that at different distance from the center, let's say 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters, 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters, we will have different impacts. The closer it is, of course, the impact is bigger. But again, using the idea of sending out the message, then it gets less warning. But the further out, it will take the wave longer time to reach, and therefore you have sufficient time to get the people to get out of the building, for example. So when you detect a earthquake at some place, then you can issue a warning to the surrounding area and saying that a earthquake is coming in your way in whatever minutes or whatever seconds, so that ask the people to come out. So this is the idea of risk warnings. You can't do that in the past, but today with the current communication infrastructure, this is possible. So this is a good way to warn the public by having sensors everywhere. And then it's, of course, it's prevent and combat. In case there's something happen, then you have to respond to it. So you have to build capability to respond to natural disasters. That include your transportation of important personnel from, for example, in the case of COVID-19 in China, the epicenter is Wuhan. So Chinese close off Wuhan. Because it's closing off and it is epicenter, that means in Wuhan there's a lot of patients. The hospital will be overrun and the nurses, the doctors will be overrun, and therefore you need to send emergency nurses and doctors into Wuhan, and that is transportation. You need transportation to move materials, to move personnel to the area. You need communication hubs so that at a sudden increase in personnel, you will have a sudden increase in communication needs. So you will need to have hubs, and then also lifelines. You need water, you need food, you need all kinds of things. So you need to have a national plan. In case something happens, then you can respond very quickly. And then strengthen the capability for emergency rescue and relief work. Rescue, of course, is emergency. That means, again, what the basic capability of moving people there, and then you need the who to go there. You need to be able to quickly assemble your rescue team and get the rescue team quick enough to reach the area, because sometimes all these disasters do have a golden window for rescue. If you miss that window, then there will be much more damage. So, and then after that, you have to continue with the relief work. What are the follow-up work? How to clear the area, how to clean it out, rebuild it, how to provide livelihood for the people. Just like here, the government is talking about rescue packages as well. So everything is similar. Now, because flood is a very important issue in China, so they put it into a section here, flood control in different river valleys. Now, the flooding in China comes with two sources or two causes. Most of the river is driven by melted ice in the plateau and in Himalayas. So the peak will come in the summer, just like Yellow River. The Yellow River's peak is in July and to about September. So this is their peak because temperature is high, and therefore there's more melting, and therefore there's more water coming up from it. But in terms of this melting, there's one big issue is sometimes the whole ice will form an ice bank, ice dam. When it forms an ice dam, then the water behind the dam will be collected and held back by the dam. But eventually the dam will collapse as well because of melting. Once the dam collapses, then all the water held back by the dam is now released at once, and suddenly you have a large amount of water flowing down the river, and that can cause flood. So one way to do that is in the spring, you send people along your river attributes and then look at where is ice dams and then blow off the ice dam earlier so that it's not holding a lot of water and then releasing it at the same time. So that is one way to avoid flooding, is controlling the water flow by looking at the source water. Another source of water flow is, of course, rainfall. And rainfall is very difficult to control, but again, it is possible to allow the rain to fall more upstream than downstream in order to spread out the rain by seeding the rain so that it rains in the dry region and then let it rain before it all go to the already very wet region and then let it rain there. So these are some methods which can control the floods. Again, looking at the banks, river banks, make sure that all the river banks are intact. There's no breakage and so forth. It's very important as well. And then they talk about a comprehensive response to disastrous calamities. So they will need various simulation experiments, train the people up, and then build relevant systems, mechanisms, work out all the policies, emergency response plans, and so forth in order to reduce all. So there is also the training element, so to speak. After you train your specialists, you also need to train your citizens. Just like in school, we will have fire drill. Every student participate, and when the bell ring in a special way, the whole school students assume there's a fire. They will all assemble at certain place and then assemble in certain way so that you can count them, make sure that you know how many students. There's no person missing and so forth. You also need to do that in a community level. What helped Chinese to control the COVID-19 is this community level monitoring for other disasters, and they click that fund in to use the community monitoring personnel in disasters to check on the people's health and disseminate all the testing kits. So this disasters committee was useful for COVID-19 in the current case. Another important thing is must strengthen scientific and technological support, because we know that a valid scientific approach will usually provide a better result, and with proper technical support, then problem can be solved easier. For example, in the old days when we don't have high-speed method of transportation, people can only ride on the horseback. So that is the maximum speed you can go there. Today you can use airplane or use other methods. So again, technology will be part of the solution. And scientific publicity and education. Again, you need to have these ideas go through the whole population. So they're talking about putting that also into the school textbooks. Make sure that everybody understand that China has a lot of disasters, and in the case of disasters, what you should do and what you can do, etc. Okay, I think I will stop here and leave the rest for next week so that we have a bit of time for discussion. What do you think? Hello? Okay, go back to discussion. Let me just stop the share first so that I can see you. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Okay, when you want to talk, just unmute yourself and speak up, but don't speak on top of other people, please. Anyone? Any question?
Oh, I'll start if you like.
Okay, you start, Albert. Yeah.
We started off with you talking about earthquakes, and I mentioned that I'd been in Christchurch just after the earthquake. Now, one of the things that intrigued me, and this would apply to any earthquake, not only Christchurch, the buildings that you expect to be damaged are not, and the ones that you don't expect are damaged. Buildings made of stone are the most damaged.
Yeah.
Buildings made of wood, timber, are the least damaged. Brick buildings are somewhere in the middle. And the reason is that wooden buildings and brick buildings can move with the earthquake, whereas stone buildings can't resist the earthquake. And I found that quite intriguing.
Yep. China, because of that, you anytime travel to China, most of the Asian buildings in China is made of wood. It's not made of stone. Whereas in Europe, most of the famous buildings like the church and so forth are made with stone.
Yes.
The fundamental reason is because in China we have so much earthquake. All those stone buildings collapsed it. So it doesn't last. It can't be historical buildings. Yes.
On that point, Albert, I've seen a technical show on building in the Forbidden City and the wood, and it was put together a bit like a Meccano set, that when an earthquake comes, it rattles and shakes like anything, but nothing falls down because it gives this room for movement,
yep,
which is the exact opposite of the stone buildings there that Albert spoke of. So it's really, they've learned by experience way in the past, and it's just very good the way where they did them. Yeah. So
but do you know that the other risk of a wooden building, which fire, yes, exactly, fire. So
and in the Forbidden City, they had a fire in the past.
Yeah.
And it was actually, I think, lit by the eunuchs guarding it.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of control on maintenance and letting contracts out for maintenance and rebuilding. And they made money on it.
Yep. And therefore, firefighting is a prerequisite in China. Chinese learn about that long time ago. They know that how important firefighting is, because
yes,
their building is wooden, and therefore it is susceptible to fire. And fire again is a natural disaster. Sometimes it can be started by a lightning. Of course, it can also be started by some person at the what's it called arsonists. Is that?
Yes.
Arson.
Yes.
Yep.
I have an interesting case on Venice with all their water. So their firefighting is just a boat with pumps and hoses. And they were maintaining a canal where the canal was blocked at each end and pumped dry to do foundation maintenance. And there was a theatre called the Fenici Theatre was being renovated in a major way. And the electrical contractor was behind. He was going to suffer penalties. So he thought he'd light a small fire. The fire brigade come, but they couldn't put it out, and they had their hoses going through people's residence in one window on one side, out the other, to go to a further canal to pump the water, which cost time, and the thing was burnt out inside, so any of the good work was done.
Yeah. Recently, now, in the old days, we don't have high-rise buildings. But now the building is getting higher and higher. So the problem now is, how do you fight a fire in a high-rise building? One way to do it is actually you build in your fire extinguishing pipes in the building, so that just like our smoke alarm. But in the case then it is not only smoke, it will just spray water, sprinkling system. So that's one way. But still it might not work in a residential area. People will haste for the sprinkler to work by accident. So most residential high-rise will not have sprinkling system. If they have, it's only in the corridor and the public area. So the question is how you can fight a fire in a high-rise residential building. the Chinese developed one of the method is using the drones, the 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 uh, the the, the thing which flies with 4 motors on.
Oh, drones, yes,
Yep.
yes.
They put a water pipe underneath the drones, and with a nozzles pointing up, which can be remotely controlled. Fly up the drones, and the pipes just go down to the fire engines, which pump the water up, and the drones spray it on top. That's a good way.
Have to be powerful drones, though.
Yeah,
wouldn't
it has been powerful drones, but we can have pretty powerful drones these days.
Yeah.
So they bring our drones up there, and with nozzles and water pipe linking to the fire engine down below to spray water.
That's a mini version of Elvis, the helicopter.
Yeah, a mini version of helicopters. Yes.
What about the building regulations and so forth then, Albert? You were the photos that you showed on your earthquake struck city all seem to be showing high-rise buildings that have been made of concrete and so forth, and yet
so they need to modify the building codes now, because once it happened, the Chinese will come in and say, no, we know that it's a problem, then we will fix it. Now, the Chinese government actually went into power in 1949, so it is about 70 something years by now. So, or 80 years, okay, not yet 100 years. So there's a lot of systems which should be in place but not in place. So what they're doing now is, for whatever something happened, then they will put their focus on that and then fix the problem. The earthquake itself prompted quite a bit of change in terms of building regulations. Nowadays, all new buildings will be able to withstand at least a Richter scale 8 or 10 before it will be approved. So they have improved on the building standards. But for many of the buildings which has already been built, then they are not going to pull them down. So they will go in and reinforce them. So there is also projects about reinforcing public buildings. But for private buildings, I think they will have to leave it that way at the moment. I don't know what will happen next. Good point.
Concerning, can
Yep.
I have a look?
Yeah, Sam?
Yeah, talking about that building, certainly China, in the world, which is building with a concrete, and then now they are using in Japan, in China, in Indonesia, that they have using the concrete, the standard steel, which still has modified and should be the strength should be much stronger and can build it up to the 100 floor, and also some will be resistant to Richard's grades for about 8, and still can be standing down, but only swinging a little bit.
Yeah, I think most of the buildings now are so-called steel columns.
Yeah.
So most of our building in Australia here is wooden. Our main structure is wood, and then the outside is only the veneer. We have the brick or other veneer, but our structure is wooden. So we are pretty safe in that sense. In China now, most of the structure is steel frameworks, and then the outside is just the veneer or the outer side of the building. The building themselves are now mostly steel framework buildings. This is the modern building anyway. And these buildings actually swing in wind as well. not only in earthquake swing, in monsoon rains. Hong Kong has a lot of high-rise building, and I used to get seasick during weather events because the whole building swing, so I will get seasick.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, Albert. I have to go, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Until next week, we'll join you for Big History in China.
Okay.
Thank you for your...
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
See you next week, Cyril.
In that case, we will end these sessions and then we'll see you next week then.
Thank
Okay.
you, Albert.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Albert.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Albert.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.